Hello, everybody. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Lance Medow with you, coming from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Giants rookie minicamp took place over the weekend, last Thursday. That was kind of the check-in medical day. Friday, Saturday, they both had practices. Sunday, they were off. And they also had some press conferences we'll talk about today. Mr. Medow, how was your weekend, sir?
Doing all right. Busy as usual. How about yourself?
Same here. I was not at, full disclosure, I was not at rookie minicamp on Saturday. Clara had her first communion, so that happened like literally as practice was going on. So I did not make that. But I've watched all the press conferences. I watched Matt Seitak's practice recap up there, some of the highlights that were up. So I checked all that out. But guys, look, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm not going to try to, I have Mr. Wet Blanket next to me, so I
know exactly what you're going to say, and I think it's accurate.
But nothing that happened on the field this weekend matters one bit. And when I say at all, I mean at all. It means nothing, nada, zilch. If it could mean less than zero, it would mean less than zero. Did Jaxson Dart throw some nice passes? Absolutely. Did I like what I saw from him in terms of his throwing arm? Absolutely. He's playing against guys for the most part. He's the only draft pick that played in 7-on-7. Everybody else for tryouts or UDFAs. So he's going up against a lot of players that, quite frankly, are probably never going to take a snap in the National Football League. You're playing in significantly simple offenses, significantly simple defenses. There's not much to tell. It's great to have him out there. It was fun to see him in helmets and uniforms for the first time, doing things that look like football. There's no contact. There's no pads. There's not much to take out from what happened on the field, though it was fun to see the guys all out there and healthy, able to play.
Yeah, I think it's much more substantive to hear what they have to say and get to know them on a personal level. That, I think, is the best thing to take away from rookie minicamp. There is nothing on the field that you can see and say at this point is going to be an indication of what will come to fruition during the course of the regular season or even down their road with respect to their careers. Listen, I get it. We're all yearning for football to resume, okay? I understand that. I can relate to that. But the problem I have with this time of the year is the over-analysis that goes into studying film and taking a clip and thinking, oh, look at the zip he threw on the pass. John, that must mean that he's going to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Well, he read the backside safety, Lance, and he made a quick decision and delivered. Oh, my gosh, imagine what he's going to do in week 1 against the Bears or whoever the Giants end up playing.
And even Brian Dable chuckles at some of the questions that he fields.
Well, I mean, what else is the media supposed to ask, though?
No, and once again, I'm not blaming them.
No, I know you're not. It's just
I'm not. I'm just trying to bring it in to put things in perspective here. That even Dable can understand, guys. We're just getting them out on the field. They're going through the motions. For example, here's to me an impressive takeaway if you want to analyze rookie minicamp. I think you get a good taste of Jaxson Dart and how serious he is about learning an offense, building rapport with his teammates. He even said that he went on the bus ride back to the hotel on Thursday night to prepare the team or the players that he was working with on offense for what they were going to come about on Friday or Saturday.
Pour them together for extra work.
Yeah, so, you like to see that. Why? Because that's a great characteristic for a young quarterback. Beyond that, how it translates to the field is the land of the unknown. And he'll be the first one to tell you it's a lot different than in training camp and even a preseason game when you got live bullets coming your way and you have to make those quick, spontaneous reactions and you don't have everything mapped out and scripted as it is over the course of these last 2 days.
So I do think it makes sense then to talk about what the guy said at the podium, and then we'll take your calls. We'll open up the phones early, folks. We'll try to get to you as much as we can at 201-939-4513. We're going to have the schedule coming out later this week as well. We could talk a little bit about that. But, Lance, let's kick it off with Jaxson Dart. Since you already touched on it, I think it's a good place to start. And I just wrote this for Cover 3. I sent it in. It'll be going up on the website. He's just like Captain Charisma. Like, just watching him at the podium, he has a way about him that you can see why guys want to follow him. You can see how he's able to connect not only with guys on offense, but also with the guys on the defensive side of the ball as well. There's just a way about him that, all right, if he ends up being a good enough player, he's going to have that kind of personality factor that you want out of your starting quarterback. Now, none of that matters at all if you're not a good enough player to be that starting quarterback. We'll see if he is. The Giants think he is. I think he's the talent to be. We'll find out if he ends up being the guy. But he certainly has that charisma, panache, follow me, leader type. He had the media all introduce themselves to him before every question. They get to know them. Just things like that. The way he engages with people. He has an easy smile. His manner is good. He's the type of guy that you're going to want to succeed and guys are going to want to follow whenever he eventually, if he's able to, take over the Giants' starting quarterback spot.
Approachable is probably the first word and term that comes to mind. I think from an optics standpoint, in terms of his presentation to the media, that certainly is attractive. But you could tell just from what the other members of the rookie class spoke about and their impressions of Jaxson Dart that they have had the ability to get to know him sometimes over the years going back to high school. For example, I think it was Marcus Bowe who mentioned that Dart was trying to recruit him to play with him at college. So, there's already
random.
An established relationship. But it reminds me of on the basketball scene, there is AAU basketball, which is leagues that go across the country and kids take part in that during the summer. So you have rival high schools that may have players from those squads that are on the same AAU team. So football is very similar. There is no AAU football.
You have the 7-on-7 circuit,
but you do have 7-on-7s, correct. But I think it's built more of a lot of these guys see each other through the high school scene, especially if they play within the same state, or they are recruited by the same school. So maybe they were on a college campus at the same time and they've built a relationship that way. But there seems to be some connection from that standpoint. But I think when you have other players that are just getting to know Jaxson Dart on a personal level and they already speak very highly of him, that they can see how serious he is about his craft, how much communication and organization matters, I think at least first impression-wise, you have to walk away impressed from that standpoint.
Hey, look, when we talk about how the pre-draft process matters, Lance, you could tell how not just the Giants, but you heard around the league, a lot of teams were really impressed by Dart coming in for his visit and how he presented himself to teams. You can see how it would be easy for him to once. I think Charlie Weiss has said this. I don't think he said it on the show we did with him, but he certainly has said it on other things I've seen him on, that once he got exposed to coaches and offensive coordinators in buildings, he's a guy they would want to coach based on how he presented himself, the work he does, his personality, and I think that kind of showed up in the press conference a little bit.
Well, I think there's the thought process. I would say this holds true for any level of athletics. If you see the quarterback go above and beyond the call of duty, then how do you then excuse yourself for not going all out? In terms of at least at this stage of the offseason, to prepare accordingly and make sure that your level of intensity meets the guy that's going out there to make sure everybody is on the same page. I think that's what you want to see out of every player, but specifically a quarterback. It's no different than a coach sets the standard, right, for the rest of the staff. If the head coach is not putting it all in during the offseason, why should the assistants follow suit? So it's the same thing from an offensive standpoint. If you know the quarterback is treating rookie minicamp as if he's preparing for the final week of the NFL regular season where maybe the playoffs or the division title is on the line, then once again, you like the approach. And I circle back to that term. I think that is a good indication. And it already seems as if some of the other rookies have made a strong impression even on Brian Dable in terms of what they're willing to put in early. For example, Cam Scatterbo, one of the things that the media asked about his approach was when he wasn't getting reps as the running back, John, he would stay behind the running back that was in and would sort of go through the motions. And Brian Dable was asked about that, and he just said, hey, every player is different in terms of how they go through a mental rep. And we talk about this all the time during the regular season. There's quarterbacks, specifically if you're number 3 on the depth chart, you're watching from the side. You're barely getting an opportunity with the first team offense because just the volume doesn't allow that. Maybe you run the scout team. So every player has to go about maximizing a mental rep. Some guys on the sideline can watch, and that's good enough. But I thought it was interesting where Cam has the approach of he still wants to be somewhat engaged in the play. From his vantage point, being behind, it still enables him to go through the motion of, okay, this is what I do, take the snap from the quarterback. This is what I have to do in terms of pass protection. I just thought that was interesting because it just goes to show you there's multiple ways to skin a cat. the old cliched phrase, well, I would think the same thing goes about in terms of making the most of mental approaches and mental reps in football.
Yeah, and I think Scadaboo at the podium, he has a blue-collar mental approach. I'm not going to be given anything. I got to earn it. It sounds like a guy that had to, I think he only had one offer coming out of high school to go to Sacramento State. Then he had to go to Arizona State off of there. So not a surprise that that's how he's going to approach this based on how he runs the football. Abdul Carter lands more the same to me. Just short answers to the point, basic, direct. What I wrote today is that I feel like there's not going to be a lot of drama surrounding Abdul Carter in terms of what he says over the course of the year, except for the drama that he causes for opposing offenses trying to game plan around him. But he just seems like a dude that's serious about his business. He cares about football, and you're not going to get a lot of extraneous stuff out of him. That's probably going to play with a bit of a mean streak. And the fact that, frankly, coming off those 2 injuries, the fact that he, no 7-on-7 again for any of the draft picks except for Dart, the fact that he was able to do all the drills and the shoulder and the foot don't seem to be an issue, that to me is the biggest takeaway from him. He seems healthy, and he should be full bore, good to go when they get on the field for Phase 3 OTAs in about first week after Memorial Day. So that'll be about 2 weeks.
But the true test will be obviously at the start of training camp once they eventually put the pads on and he's going up against the opposing offensive linemen. But yeah, I think it's nice to at least see that he's been able to take part in some workouts. The clips are all over Giants.com, the internet, and so forth. I mean, especially given that was a big part of the talking point and the evaluation, right, of Carter coming into the draft. How serious is the foot injury? Is it something that teams should be worried about? And clearly the Giants got all the check marks. They didn't have any concern. And the fact that he's already been a participant in rookie minicamp, I think, is appealing and appetizing. I think, Abdul Carter, just my personal opinion, John, the one thing, though, that I think is important for him to come to grips with is he's got to create his own path. He shouldn't worry so much about building comparisons to other Giants pass rushers or trying to live in their shadow. He's Abdul Carter. Go about your business and carve out your own opportunities. Don't worry about what people on the outside or the inside are doing because of the, once again, rich lineage of Giants pass rushers and so forth. I think it was, I forget who the player was, who's wearing 91 that was asked about being
Darius
compared to.
Alexander.
Okay, so Alexander, immediately it came up. Oh, do you know who wore 91? Justin Tuck. Darius Alexander should not be put up against Justin Tuck. Justin Tuck had a tremendous career with the Giants. He already established what he could do. You should not be comparing a rookie that has not played one NFL snap to some of the Giants' greats. It just, personally, it bothers me. And it's not just about the Giants. It's about any player in the NFL. There is this itch, there's this urge, whether it's the media, whether it's fans, that we always have to get into immediate comparison. We don't. Let these guys get on the field and go out and prove themselves before it's even entertained whether or not they could scratch the surface of somebody that already played a decade in the National Football League. It's a little ridiculous.
People
and
like comparisons, Lance. It gives people like a feeling that they understand what the player is, even though what does a number have to do with any of that, which is kind of the silly part
Well, then
of it,
I would say,
yes.
but John, my response to that would be then make the comparison to a guy coming out of college.
That's fair.
And how he played, not somebody that already went through the ebbs and flows of an NFL career.
I agree. Darius Alexander, I thought he came off as like a really, chill, pretty mature guy. I think, people will be happy with him. He's raising a son, so I'm not surprised. He's going to be 25. He's an older player.
Yep.
So like that, I know more about Tommy Fidoni's tattoos than I ever thought I'd want to know about.
Absolutely.
Which is
yes.
great. Feeling good off the injuries. That was the important thing off of him. Of course, he's played the last 2 years in college. Those 2 back-to-back ACL tears at the same knee came in his freshman and sophomore years of college. That was, 3 and 4 years ago. But he sounded pretty good. And then Corey Black talked a little bit about his Oklahoma State defense compared to the NFL. So nothing crazy from the other guys that I think is and Marcus Bowe, again, he was very calm when he spoke to Sean O'Hara after the draft. He's very calm. And I think we kind of got that sense, too, when he was at the podium. So not much jumped out at me from those 2 guys other than, like most of the guys Joe Schoen has drafted, they're pretty calm, they're chill, and they're, ready to roll.
Fidoni pointed out that he loved the fact that he got to play for Matt Rule, who had NFL coaching experience, so he feels that helped prepare him.
And they ran an NFL offense, so
Correct.
absolutely.
So
Correct.
that was at least a notable takeaway. Corey Black discussed, and even Fedoni to a certain degree, and I would throw out maybe a few other players just about the fact that they've been around prospects that made it to the NFL and that they can at least talk to them. For example, I think Darius Alexander, the one thing I'll add is he came from Toledo, but there have been several players, John, in recent history that have actually come from the Toledo program and have gone into the NFL.
I mean, Deontay Johnson, a player in the Giants,
correct,
as an example.
Is a perfect example. So he's going to reunite with him, and then, of course, the Eagles corner as well. So, when you hear about recent examples, I think what Alexander was getting at is he has tangible evidence. He doesn't have to worry about dreaming of or being overwhelmed about what he's walking into. He picks up the phone, or he walks into the locker room in the Giants case, and he talks to these guys what the transition was like. So I thought that was at least interesting, because there are times where a player comes out of a smaller program and he may be the first player in program history or the first player in 15 to 20 years, right, that makes it to the NFL. And you're just wondering, well, why was there a significant gap in the program? Now, sometimes it's because the program didn't have stability from a coaching standpoint. They couldn't develop. But I think it's encouraging that he's coming from Toledo, where they didn't just all of a sudden pop up out of nowhere. For the last few years, they've been doing a good job developing and growing. And I think the most impressive thing that Darius Alexander talked about, and we learned a little bit about this in the wake of the draft, John, but he was asked some follow-up questions. Why did you stay at Toledo when you probably had every opportunity to go elsewhere? And it's a game of musical chairs in terms of college football. There's no stability. It's easy for a kid to play one place 1 year, jump to take the money. And Darius said loyalty means something to him. He also had talked about that he loved his coaches. And I'm not saying, once again, that we need to give him brownie points, and I'm going to say that he's going to be able to stick with the Giants for his entire career and he'll never leave. But I just think it's refreshing to hear a player not be consumed by the finances and be consumed more about what's going to do wonders for me in getting to a point where I feel I can go to the next level and compete. And I thought, that's something that speaks volumes about where he is mentally and physically. And I think also perhaps his age influenced his feelings from that standpoint. So maybe it's not as big of a surprise if we were talking to a 20-year-old compared to a 25-year-old. I think the 5 years of difference adds some perspective.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the calls. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Folks, don't forget, go check out the Giants Huddle podcast feed. A lot of good episodes up there coming up. I don't believe that he's up yet, but later on today, you're going to have Dan Orlovsky from ESPN will join us to talk about Jaxson Dart and just his progress from college to the NFL, his developmental cycle, and all that stuff. So good stuff from Dan. You can go back last couple of weeks. We've had Chase Daniel. We've had Kurt Warner. Those are really good spots. So go check those out on the Giants Huddle podcast. Some really good interviews on there. I think it is definitely worth your time. And that's, again, Giants app, giants.com/podcast, or search for Giants Huddle on your favorite podcast platform. And we have our final draft season of this cycle. Came up late last week. Tony Paulie and I look at the 2026 watch list. I'm not going to call it the draft class or a mock draft or rankings even. But these are guys that when you start watching college football in August and September, keep your eyes on these guys. If they continue to progress and continue to play well, they have a chance to become kind of your next set of first-round picks as you head into the 2026 season. So Clemson is going to be really good this year. It's kind of based on what Tony and I went through. Clemson's got a lot of guys, man. And then, Sweeney doesn't go into the transfer portal nearly as much.
He builds a program.
And I think you're seeing that happen now, where the guys that have been there a couple of years are all kind of maturing at the same time. Cade Klubnik should be a pretty good quarterback as well. Clemson should be a very, 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 very good football team next year. And a lot of Penn State, actually, at the top of the a lot of these like preseason spring rankings, too. A lot of people have Penn State as number one. Drew Aller's coming back. The running back's coming back. Their whole defense, except for I think Kalen King, right? He was Caleb King's brother, the linebacker, and Abdul Carter are coming back. So Penn State's supposed to be really good too. And then you have all your regular teams. Ohio State's really good again. Alabama,
the
Georgia.
Usual suspects.
Illinois was in a couple of top tens that I saw, so that could be fun to see where they wind up. But otherwise, a lot of the usual suspects. 201-939-4513. Johnny Mac, we're going to start on line 3. I'm going to go to Diego in Las Vegas to lead us off here. Diego, what's going on?
Hey guys, how you doing?
We're great.
Yeah, first time caller, a long time listener to the show, so appreciate you guys having me on.
No problem.
Just wanted to call and really ask about the defensive line. I've been a longtime Giants fan, and I tend to overhype the team a little bit heading into every season. I think as most fans do.
Well, you're a fan, Diego. You should be excited about the team. That's okay.
But this season, I have a feeling that we really have the right building blocks heading for the future, right? Especially, that defensive line. And forgive me if you guys have done this already, but I just wanted to get your guys' predictive, sack totals for the season, just because, again, I think the defensive line really could be the best in the NFL, if not top 5, if not this year, heading in 2026 for sure. You
want individual players or the team?
The team sack total or the sack total of the defensive line. Just because I know with individuals it can vary, right? Like Dexter Lawrence could have 8 sacks or 10 sacks, or just depending on the rotation. So really, I just wanted to get your predictive sack total for the defensive line group, and then your thoughts as far as the future of the defensive line. If you think that's going to remain our identity for the next 5 years or so.
No, awesome. Diego, appreciate the call, man. Good stuff. I think that's a great question. Appreciate you calling us after being a listener to the show for so long. All right, you want to go team first, Lance? And then we'll go...
Well, they had 45 last season.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think is important to take into consideration, he said the defensive line. The problem is you got edge rushers that are not necessarily always on the defensive line.
I think we're counting those in the defensive line category.
Okay, so
yes.
We're going to then at least expand the definition of what he was saying.
So why don't we start team sacks first, all right? So the Giants actually led the league in sacks for almost half the season last year. And they finished, with 45, which is tied for 8th most in the National Football League. So given, they won 3 games, how bad the team was and how little they played with the lead and how well teams ran the ball on them, I think 45 is my low water mark. I'd be shocked if they had fewer than 45 this year. Now, here's the trick, though, Lance. And sacks are in a large part controlled by the opposing quarterback that you're playing.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks control sacks, right? Well, you're bringing up the opponents for me? I'm going to bring up the opponents. You got to take a look at who the Giants' 2025 opponents are going to be. Right? And then you should look at that, and then you could figure out, well, how likely are the Giants to have high sack numbers based on who their opponents are going to be, right? So let's go.
Well, we know within the division here.
Well, we have off on that, all right? Dak Prescott, Cowboys offensive line, difficult to sack. Jalen Hurts, great offensive line, mobile quarterback, difficult to sack. Jaden Daniels is basically just
difficult
so fast, he's difficult to sack. We will hold the ball a little bit sometimes, all right? Jordan Love, good offensive line, mobile quarterback. Veteran, young veteran, still veteran, difficult to sack. Vikings, they might be starting a rookie quarterback. You can get after rookie quarterback a little bit. J.J. McCarthy is not exactly Captain Mobility. He's not immobile, but he's not Jaden Daniels either, okay? Patrick Mahomes, enough said. Justin Herbert, enough said. Difficult to sack. Brock Purdy, the way the Niners get rid of the ball. Kyle Shanahan, that is not a guy that takes a lot of sacks. He will get the ball. And Purdy's actually, I think he's fair. He has some mobility to him to avoid sacks as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are your home opponents. You got that whole group. You have one guy that you think maybe you might be able to get some sacks on, McCarthy. Everyone else is a very difficult player to sack based on the quarterback and the offensive line. Go to the away opponents here. Caleb Williams, eminently sackable. Now, new coach. They've really firmed up the interior of that offensive line in free agency. So that's going to make it tougher. But Caleb Williams does hold the football. He's a guy I think sackable. All right? Denver Broncos. Bo Nix will hold the ball. Here's the problem. The Broncos might have had the best pass-protecting offensive line in football last year. That's how good it was. So not easy. Sean Payton knows how to get the ball out quick. I would qualify him as difficult to sack. Fair?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially, Sean teaches his quarterbacks. He doesn't want them holding on to it. I think that's why Russell Wilson and him didn't necessarily always get along.
Bingo. Agreed. Okay. Lions, really good offensive line.
One of the best last year.
New offensive coordinator, though, and Jared Goff is not mobile. So I wouldn't say easy to sack, but
I think the line makes up for it.
I agree.
For the times that he may hold on to it.
I would still say difficult to sack.
Plus,
right?
they run the ball very well, too. Not a lot of passing down situations.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, Geno Smith, will hold the football. The Raiders' offensive line is suspect.
Yep.
You can sack him. So that's a third guy on your schedule. You can get some sacks. The Saints, we don't know who the quarterback is.
We don't know. I mean, Tyler Shook could be it, a rookie. Who knows?
Bottom line, you should be able to get some sacks against the Saints. So that's 4 teams on your schedule that you think you should be able to do okay against. Same with Drake May, young quarterback, inexperienced offensive line, or not a very good offensive line. Though they did add some people in the offseason. So you're looking at 5 of your 17 games. You're going to have a chance to get some sacks. That's not a great number. Like you could last year, you faced the Browns, the Seahawks, the Steelers, the Panthers, the Saints. Those are all teams, the Colts, that have quarterbacks that you can get after. Even Lamar Jackson takes some sacks, even though he's mobile, right? He'll hold the football a little bit. So I don't feel great about the schedule, but I think the team's going to be better, Lance, so you'll play with more leads more frequently. You add Abdul Carter to the mix on defense. I think 45 to me, I would not say lower than 45, in my opinion. So I would put the over-under here at 46.5, something like that, 45.5 in terms of where I think they would be. And then I think you would go over-under that. So I think they should be a top 10 teams in terms of pass rush, in my opinion. Where they wind up, I'll say 46, just to kind of give you the same number in the neighborhood. I think that's a number that makes sense.
Keep in mind, the one thing that I was looking back at, in 2 games, they had a third of their sacks last season. Okay, they had 8 against Cleveland. They had 7 against Geno Smith.
Yep.
So you do the math. That's 15 of the 45 in just 2 games alone.
Now Geno's on the schedule again.
No, Geno, of course, but
yes.
Different team, different dynamics.
No, I got
the point is, it's who you play. It's also, the offensive line, the state of when you get that offensive line. That's why I would maybe be a little bit more conservative. I think between 40 to 42 sacks is reasonable for them. I'll go a little bit lower just because they had 3 or 4 high-volume sack games, and I just don't think you could bank on that every single season. That does, in fairness, increase the numbers from at least that standpoint. But there's no reason why this team can't get minimum 40, 41 sacks this year.
That would put them middle of the pack. Last year, the Bears had 40 sacks, and the Eagles had 41, and they were like the 15th and 16th ranked teams in sacks. So that'll put them right at the middle of the league.
So, and once again, I'm going that on the lower side. I mean, they could very well match last year's total, but I'm going to be a little bit more conservative, not giving them necessarily the benefit of the doubt that you're going to get an 8, a 7, and maybe another 8 sack game, because, that's 3 games that made up for a big bulk of your sacks last season.
Now, I say, given the addition of Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, I think end of the year, if you told me that they were 16th in sacks, I think I'd be disappointed.
That's fair. But, I mean, if they finish, let's say, 12th or 13th, would you be disappointed? Right outside, let's say, the top 10? I mean, I don't think that's...
12th would be okay. I think if this defense wants to be successful, they have to sack the quarterback a lot.
Well, there's no doubt about it, but I think what's going to be more telling is where they finish ranked against the run. That, to me, I would say that is the number that I would get caught up in from a fan perspective than where they finish in terms of sacks. Sacks are sexy, and it's nice, but
they are just sexy and they're nice. They end possessions. If you get a sack on a possession, you're probably going to get off the field.
But I think if you look at last season, given what that led to wins and how most of the games were lopsided, it just goes to show you, had their run defense been a lot better. I'm not saying they would have won, let's say, triple the amount of games, but I think you probably would have accounted for many more competitive games. That statistic.
Fair, but let me put it this way. These are the teams that finished with more sacks than the Giants last year. Broncos, playoff team. Ravens, playoff team. Cowboys, just missed it. Texans, no good. Vikings, yes. Chargers, yes. Bucks, yes. Packers, yes. So all those teams that finished ahead of the Giants, and then right behind the Giants with the Seahawks, also made the playoffs. 2 down from that of the Commanders, also made the playoffs. So if you rack up the sacks, there's a good chance you're going to make the postseason.
No, I'm not disputing that. I'd be curious, though. I want to look up where the run defenses were in terms of last season. And I think that would be also an interesting tally to see where some of these teams finished. I'm bringing up, let's see, defense against the run last season. So Baltimore was number 1
per game.
I'm going to go yards per game.
All right,
correct.
So Ravens playoffs, Vikings playoffs, Broncos playoffs, Bucks playoffs, Lions playoffs, Steelers. They made it, right? Or did they just make it? Did they just make it?
Yeah, they just made it.
They just made it, right?
Yeah.
Steelers playoffs, Packers playoffs, Chiefs playoffs. So top 8, yes.
Yep.
Dolphins, no. Eagles,
Yep.
yes. Texans, no. And there's your top 11. And more importantly, but again, part of that is those teams have leads a lot. So the other team is running the ball less frequently. I would be more curious to see what the yards per carry would be. Or
Texans made the playoffs,
team-wise.
by the way, last year. The Texans were in.
Oh, they made it. That's right.
Yeah, they made it. Yeah.
They were not
So-
good, but they made it.
Well, down the stretch late last season because of injuries and Stroud and,
also
so forth.
bad division.
Without a doubt. But they did. They were a playoff team.
So when I looked at the sacks, I said the no to them when they were in the top 10 sacks. Too,
but I'm saying it holds true for both. It's
Correct,
sacks
yes.
and the run defense. But, I mean, that's a high volume of teams that we ran through in terms of the run defense. So, I mean, just my personal opinion, I think that you shore that up. I think you put yourself in a better position to be more competitive and even help whether you get a sack or not, because what you're doing is you're more than likely putting the opposition in tougher third down situations. If you're stopping the run, right? Think about it. Earlier on downs, first and second, then you're probably putting the opposition in a 3rd and 7 as opposed to a 3rd and 4. And even if you don't get the sack, you're at least in a position to affect and impact the quarterback by applying pressure. So that's more of a reason why I'll hang my hat on. Give me a really strong run defense as opposed to a team that has overwhelming sacks. Not to say, to your point, that sacks is not going to help your cause get to the playoffs, but I think other things feed off of a run defense, maybe more so than just a sack on an island.
Okay, individual sack leaders now. Let's look at that. Someone's going to get double digits this year. I don't know. I would guess it's going to be Burns, if I had to guess who.
Yeah, 8.5 last season, so I would say he's within striking distance.
Dexter could get there, too.
Yeah.
He had 9 sacks in 12 games last year. That's how dominant he was. So those are two guys that I would say have the best chance to get over 10. I would put Carter in anywhere from the 8 to 11 area, and I put Thibodeau somewhere in the 7 to 9 area. I think that's probably a good combination of those 4 guys in terms of what they can get.
If memory serves me correct, and I'm going to look it up, Kayvon, if you look back at his rookie season, sometimes you'll see the sacks fluctuated a lot. You know, they were top-heavy, bottom-heavy. So, you know, you have to account for that during a rookie campaign just because there's going to be some teams that are ill-prepared for Abdul Carter. They haven't seen much of him on film. And then there's going to be other teams that maybe see him later on in the season, right, and just have a better read on what he could do. So I'm bringing up the game log.
Thibodeau did not have Brian Burns with him as a rookie either,
of course,
which is a big factor here. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be able to double-team Abdul Carter because you got Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence sitting there.
Yeah, and you got Kayvon, too, who will be in the mix, too.
Yep.
So he benefits from, I would say, the more the merrier type of philosophy. But just to give an idea about a recent rookie, you look at Kayvon with respect to what he did in the 2022 season, and I'm bringing up the game log. So you had, if we go to early in the season, September, let's see, he didn't have a sack until October 16th against the Ravens. I remember he got hurt in the preseason too, okay? So I'm not going to dismiss that. He missed the first few games of the season, but he had his first sack against Baltimore October 16th, and the next sack didn't come until December 4th. And then, you know, had a few towards the latter part of the season, one on the 18th, and then one on January 1st, just to give you an idea. And I'm not saying that Abdul Carter's only going to get 4, because hopefully he won't have to deal with an injury like Kayvon did. But if you see rookies, they come sacks by definition in patches, in bunches, however you want to word it. But specifically for a rookie and Kayvon, it's been a big roller coaster where it's been 3 games where wow, and then all of a sudden it's quiet for 4, and then it picks up. So I think sometimes you got to take that into consideration for even a guy that may have a lot of talent around him.
And then, Diego, we'll do our over-unders later in the year. We'll do our predictions for the year, and then we'll give you the exact numbers. But I think that's what you're aiming for with a lot of those guys. All right, 201-939-4513. All right, we got 2 calls on the same topic, but let's do Donnie and Queens first, J-Mac, on line 1. Donnie, what's going on?
Are the Knicks going to win tonight, John?
I sure as heck hope so. I'm going to be in the building tonight, so that would be great.
Yeah, good luck. I'm not too confident, but hopefully since you'll be there, maybe you'll bring some good energy.
Yeah.
What is this thing? A lucky charm?
It's optimism time, certainly this time of year. We're obviously, I think we're all excited about the draft class, even though you never know really how these guys are going to turn out. I think for me, my biggest disappointment of the offseason was probably the money that went to Javon Holland. Would have preferred that on someone either on the interior of the offensive line or the interior of the defensive line. But I think it's pretty clear that the Giants are in the best spot they've been in the last, I want to say, almost decade right now. From just like if you look at the roster, you're starting to see the shell of a core and a team you can actually build and grow with. I think it's pretty clear they'll try to build this team to get to opening day 2026. I know there's a whole season to play, but in reality, the real plan is get to opening day 2026. They'll probably go into next offseason and go heavy on the offense. They're going to have money to spend. They're going to have their first and second round pick. So feeling good about that. I do feel like, it was the right call here to bring Joe and Brian back. I was nervous when they brought Joe back because I thought he would act more desperate. I want to give him a lot of credit. I think he really handled himself professionally.
Donnie, by the way, I'm happy you brought that up because I tried to warn people here that I know a lot of the national people too were like, he's going to sell out, he's going to sacrifice the future and all that stuff. And I really don't think that's how they operated this offseason.
No, and perhaps maybe credit to Mara and Tish that these guys are on firmer ground than maybe we think. We don't necessarily know what the conversations are behind the scenes. So I thought that the organization handled themselves professionally, whereas the prior regime, I don't think did that in terms of like that last offseason. It seemed pretty clear that they had like certain things that they had to do. They weren't going to let things come to them. So definitely feel like particularly the last two off seasons have been very clean for the Giants. Everything has made sense, and even Joe's whole tenure, he's never really made a move that I thought was illogical. Like you could be disappointed in the way Evan Neal's turned out. That was a logical selection.
No, Donnie, I think his process and his thought process and the way he thinks about roster building makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if you look at where he's drafted, it's been the premium positions. The Saquon thing blew up in his face, but overall, philosophically, it was the right decision for the franchise. It just sucks that he went to, your division rival who was set up to maximize that player's capabilities. So overall, I think I feel the best I have about the Giants in probably the last decade. And I don't even necessarily feel great about Jaxson, but to me, it's even if things don't work out, he'll be easy to move on to. They didn't tie themselves to it. They're not stuck there, based on the capital they gave him too. So overall, feeling pretty good, and I'll try to check in with you guys a little bit towards more training camp. Once again, just a great job on the draft, and let's go next tonight.
Thank you, Donnie. I appreciate the call. I'll just say this. I think, like I said, again, you can talk about individual players not working out, but based on picking players based on where they are on the consensus board, for the most part, there's been a couple of exceptions here or there. They've done a good job, I think, of getting value in the draft, Lance. They've focused a lot in the trenches in a lot of these drafts in terms of getting players up front. If it hasn't been up front, it's been, wide receiver or corner where they focused on their picks, which are also premium spots at quarterback. I think the team building and the way he's going about it has made sense. And Joe even said this, that it wasn't his intention to just go so defense heavy in free agency. It's just how it worked out with the players available, how it made sense for the class. I'm surprised, and again, I don't think this was necessarily his plan. I think it was dictated by what was available to them. And I've said this before, I would have thrown more resources at the offense if I could, whether it's offensive line or wide receiver, just to kind of beef up that group so whenever that young quarterback gets into play, the circumstances around him are as ideal as possible. And I think it just so happened with the free agent class and who was available and what the market was, and then with the way the draft played out, it just turned out defensive players were the ones that made sense, right? There weren't a lot of 25-year-old offensive players like Javon Holland or Paulson Adebo that were going to step in near the top of their free agency class and help you. When the Giants came to pick third overall, there wasn't a logical offensive player to take that was a better player than Abdul Carter. When the Giants came to pick in round 3, Darius Alexander was just much higher than whatever offensive player was going to be available on their board. So I just think it's how it's went based on what the market has dictated in the draft and in free agency. But I would have liked to see a little bit more thrown into the offensive side of the ball. But again, I don't think that was Joe's plan. I think he's trying to get as many good football players on the roster as possible. And just so happened this offseason that a lot of them happen to be on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I mean, the worst thing you could do is force the issue.
Exactly.
And then you start reaching for players because you're just listening to all the noise from the outside. The other way to look at it is if you just drafted Jaxson Dart and the transition we're assuming is not going to happen immediately because you have a veteran quarterback ahead of him, that you buy yourself some time to beef up the offense, that when Dart does take over, they may have another offseason or two and clearly another draft class or two to bring in maybe some depth at wide receiver, or the offensive line is going to evolve because there are some veterans on short-term contracts that we've talked about currently on the offensive line. So it's not as if you don't have the flexibility to make tweaks. And I always say this, NFL rosters, even if you don't feel good about your team's salary cap situation, it's fluid. The cap has continually gone up. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if you really want a player or you want to make a move, there's a way to go about it. It's just a matter of how much are you willing to sacrifice and how much are you willing to kick down the road in terms of kicking the can. So this idea that you get so far ahead and you look at it as a miserable path, I never subscribe to that because I can't tell you how many times teams have been labeled as in horrendous cap situation, and then an executive comes in and all of a sudden they make trade A, B, and C because, once again, they're willing to move things around. So there's always the flexibility to do that. It's just a matter of how much and how far is the front office willing to go.
Yeah, and by all accounts, long-term, the Giants' cap situation is still very good. It's not problematic. Next year, they're right in the middle of the league in terms of cap space. The year after that, they got a ton of money. Of course, then you have to deal with guys like Andrew Thomas's contracts.
Well, because the rookies are going to start.
Coming up soon. You got to pay your rookie class, all that stuff. So, but I think they've handled that part of it well, too. All right. Our next two callers are the same topic, so I'm going to let them go back to back here, and then we'll answer kind of the overall topic when you're done. So let's go to Justin in New York first, because he called first. Justin, what's going on?
Hey, guys. I wanted to chat about the quarterback room a little bit, maybe from a different perspective. Before the offseason really kicked off, the only quarterback we had was Tommy DeVito, and so we went out and signed Russell and Jameis. And then the draft came along, and we weren't sure we were going to get a quarterback where we wanted, how we wanted, and we ended up with Jaxson Dart. Now it looks like we have one of the heavier quarterback classes or quarterback rooms in the league.
That's a good thing, though.
Three guys who all starting for a team could potentially get a 500 record. So I'm a little bit confused now what Jameis Winston's role is on the team. If people like Jaxson Dart, which I personally do, I think with a little bit of training and he could maybe even start midway through the season. If Russell goes down somehow, I don't see why you wouldn't throw Jaxson Dart out there to get some playing time.
Wait, Justin, hold on. Justin, hold on. Legit question. Third quarter, week 1, Russell Wilson strains his hamstring, is going to miss 3 weeks. Who's your starter in week 2?
In week 2, that early, I would say Jameis probably.
Bingo. There's your role.
But when you get to week 4 or week 5, and
that's
the trade
early.
Deadline's looming, and we don't have a third-round pick next year,
who says you're going to get a third-round pick for Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I mean, he got $4 million in free agency.
I think you're way overvaluing the desperation of the rest of the NFL and what they're willing to give up. I don't think you're aware. I would look at how many different starting quarterbacks across the NFL. Forget the Giants.
Just look at the Giants.
But there were 59 different starting quarterbacks. Each of the previous 2 seasons, there were over 60 guys that started across the league. You, more often than not, are going to wind up playing multiple quarterbacks. It's just the nature of the NFL. I don't know why you would be in such a rush to get rid of a quarterback when right now on paper they are in a healthy situation. I think that's something that should be maintained.
And the other part of it, too, is that, remember, Winston signed a 2-year deal. Russell Wilson signed a 1-year deal. So if you're looking ahead to maybe if you want Dart to be your starter next season, for example, you have Winston then under contract at a very good salary number to be your backup next year. So I think that's part of the equation there as well.
Okay. Because it seemed to me like we had 3 guys who, in theory, I mean, if Jaxson Dart becomes a player in this league, who are all like competitive as a starting quarterback, and I don't know any other teams that have 3. It seemed like we have a lot of value in that quarterback room.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. What was the demand for Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston in free agency this year?
I mean, there were maybe...
Well, in free agency in the offseason when no one had injured quarterbacks, or the Saints have 3 guys, under 26 years old, who none of them really have, starting time in the league yet.
No, I know, but
does Jameis completely change the outlook of the Saints? You put Jameis Winston on the Saints currently. Does it take them to a division contender, a top team in the NFC?
And remember, Tyler Shook is an older quarterback that played in an NFL offense in Louisville. So I think if there's any and I said this during the draft process, so I'm being consistent. If there's any quarterback in this class that I think you plug in right away as your starting quarterback, it's a guy like Shook, just because of how old he is and because of what system he played in college.
See, I would think if the Giants are going to make a trade, not that I'm saying this is going to happen, I'll go back to, there was a year where, if you recall, Teddy Bridgewater went down late in training camp. He suffered the knee injury, the non-contact. So the Vikings wound up calling up the Eagles, who had drafted Carson Wentz that year, and they acquired Sam Bradford. So if a situation like that pops up, maybe all of a sudden the value of who you have on your depth chart changes, because the Vikings looked at themselves as a contender that year. And they said, well, we're not going into the season with a question mark. We want to make sure that we have somebody that could go out there and keep our offense competitive. But short of a situation like that happening out of left field, I don't see why, A, the Giants would want to sacrifice their options, and B, a team would be in desperation mode where they would be saying, oh, we'll give you a third-round pick and you should give up one of our veterans who, by the way, is on a multi-year contract, as John mentioned. So, I mean, that is what I would say could change the dialogue. As it stands right now, there is no need or any urgency for them to move a signal
Now,
caller.
Justin, I will say, if you get, and look, last year the trade deadline was at the beginning of November. It was November 4th last year. I don't think they've said what the deadline's going to be this year, but it's probably, first.
I think they're going to keep
again.
it similar, yeah.
Exactly. They actually backed it up a couple weeks from what it was.
And I think they like that because more teams were competitive and still in the mix.
So if you get to the last week of October, Justin, to your point, and you really like what Dart has showed you in meeting rooms and in practice, and you think that he's ready to be your backup, and you want to make some type of move, then I get that. But I do think they wanted to structure this so that they would be under no pressure to put him in before they thought he was ready. And I think they liked the idea that right now he would be your number 3 and not your number 2, so that the only thing that's going to impact whether or not Jaxson Dart gets on the field is whether or not the Giants think he's ready for it. And it's not going to be forced due to an injury to Russell Wilson or anything else.
Well, and also, Russell Wilson's 36 years old.
Thank you, Justin.
He's been in the league. Appreciate the phone call. He's been in the league since 2012. He missed the early stages of last season with a calf injury. That's why Justin Fields started in Pittsburgh. You have to protect yourself. He is not immune to injury. It's possible. And once again, we're not wishing it upon any player, but you're just being realistic. The previous caller was about how Joe Shane's approach has been logical, right? So it was logical to say, I'm going to have 2 veterans even before we draft a quarterback. Just because you draft a quarterback doesn't mean now you change the timeline, John, and you rush Dart onto the field because you think you can maybe get, which I think is unrealistic, a high mid-round pick for a veteran quarterback with a lot of mileage on him. I don't see that coming to fruition. I just don't.
You aren't getting a high mid-round pick for that. There's not. It's just not. It's almost an impossibility.
Well, unless, once again, a contender loses somebody out of the blue and they have to completely change their approach. For example,
I understand, but you have to then be under the impression that whoever their backup is, they think Jameis Winston is better than they are.
Oh, without a doubt. You absolutely. That's why I brought up the Vikings
example.
And
my point is that Jameis did not get top of the market backup quarterback money. He got $4 million, right? Is what the report was, if that's correct.
Sure.
Tyrod Taylor's making 8. Some backup quarterbacks making close to 10. So that there's a lot that has to come together for that to make sense.
I just looking it up, and once again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. The Vikings, they wound up giving up a first-round pick for Sam Bradford. That just went to show you. And I'm bringing that up because of, once again, you could sometimes get in desperation mode. But I want to say Sean Hill was the backup to Teddy Bridgewater. Yeah, it was. Sean Hill started the first week. I remember this. This is what happens when you cover the NFL for so many years.
That's
I know.
Good.
That trade has always stood out to me, and the last caller reminded me of it because I'm not saying that there's no scenario where that can't happen, but that's what it took. That's what I wanted to paint here. It took a Vikings team that had a positive outlook that right as the season was going to start loses their guy. And now all of a sudden, their general manager, who was a colleague of mine at Sirius, Rick Spielman, all of a sudden realizes, okay, I got to pull the trigger. But short of putting a GM in that spot, I don't think you're going to get that level of return.
201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Let's go back to the phones and stay on the same topic. And Lou hung up. Okay, so let's go to Anthony in New Jersey. Anthony, what's going on?
How's it going, guys?
What's up?
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you.
Of course, huge Giants fan, and I've been critical of Joe Shane and the drafts in the past, like 2023, 2022. I wasn't a huge fan of most of the selections, especially 2022. I felt like he was reaching on positions as opposed to best player available. And
which players in Anthony? Which players in 2022 do you think were reaches? Certainly not Thibodeau or Neal.
No. Those picks I was thrilled about. It was mostly day 2 and 3, especially like Wandale. I love Wandale, but I thought that was a little early for like a 5'7" short arm receiver at the time.
Okay, that's fair.
And Azudu, Flat, wasn't like insanely thrilled about those picks, but besides all that, like I was super excited about these past 2 drafts. I think this most recent class that just happened is going to be potentially like generational for this franchise. The only pick I wasn't thrilled about was Jaxson Dart, but I just had a question about like the timetable about Jaxson Dart and like what's going to happen with the front office. Like, what do you think they're going to do with regards to like maybe saving their jobs? Because this is obviously like a make or break year for them. So maybe I was thinking towards the end of the season, say they're 4-9. I feel like regardless of who's healthy, who's not, they're probably going to throw in Jaxson Dart and just see what happens.
Well, look, I would say, Anthony, it depends what he's showing them. And I think, Brian Daboll is going to have some level of confidence. I don't think he's going to jeopardize the kid's development just to put him out there. And he's going to think he knows whether or not he's going to be better than whatever they are putting out there. But look, if the record's bad late in the year, is it more likely he gets a chance than not? Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about that. But again, I think, and this goes back to the previous caller's point, I think the Giants love the fact that right now they're not going to have their hands forced on the quarterback. And I think, I forget, was it Donnie who called up and said this regime has not operated as though they're in a desperate situation, and I don't think that's how they're going to operate this year either. And I think they will put Jaxson Dart in when he's ready, and it makes sense for the team. And we're not going to know when he's ready. Only they're going to know when they think he's ready. And by the way, they're not even going to know for sure that he's ready. They're going to think that he's ready based on what he's done.
Yeah.
So we're all going to have to just wait and see when that moment arrives. It could be sooner than we all think, or it could be later than we all think. I have no idea. Anyone, and I actually asked, I forget if it was Kurt Warner or Chase Daniel, I asked, or maybe it was Orlovsky, when's the earliest you would play Dart? And I prefaced the question by saying, look, I know this is an impossible question because you don't know what his developmental cycle is. You don't know his health. You don't know how the team's playing. When do you think he's getting on the field? When do you think he should get on the field? So it's impossible for us to know now when that moment's going to come because so many circumstances are going to play into that decision-making process. You know what I mean?
Well, and here's another thing just to take into consideration, Anthony. I'm going to give you, these are a list of coaches that lost their jobs within a year of selecting a first-round quarterback. Frank Reich with the Panthers, Urban Meyer and the Jaguars, Matt Nagy and the Bears, Anthony Lynn and the Chargers, Pat Shurmur here with the Giants, because remember, he went to Daniel Jones early that season in 2019, Jay Gruden with Washington, Hugh Jackson with the Browns, Todd Bowles with the Jets, and Steve Wilkes with the Cardinals. So this narrative, and I'm not accusing you of bringing it up and saying that there's a lot of substance behind it, that by playing a rookie quarterback the year in which he was drafted and he shows a flash or two saves somebody their job based on what I just read, and that's only going back to 2018, doesn't really hold a lot of weight. So I wouldn't get caught up in, if they only have 4 wins, they put in Dart, he, has a game or two, and that means that all of a sudden everybody's safe. The NFL doesn't operate like that.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate those points. I just had one other point to make.
Yeah.
I noticed one thing when, evaluating some of Jaxson Dart and watching some Ole Miss games. I noticed his pocket presence isn't always the best. Sometimes he'll like lower his eyes and just scramble when there's still time in the pocket, and he'll run into sacks sometimes. So I was wondering, like, if you think that's something that can actually be like developed, or that's just an innate trait that some quarterbacks have, some quarterbacks don't have.
Now, Anthony, I will say this. Unlike some other quarterbacks, when he did run, though, and lower his eyes, he ran up and through the pocket. There was not a lot of running backwards and around and towards the sideline, which is when I think quarterbacks can get into a lot of trouble in terms of how they handle pressure. I agree. I think Dart scrambled to run more than he scrambled to throw. And that goes to your point, I think, of his eyes dropping a little bit when he felt pressure. But I never felt like he was panicked back there. And that's something that Chase Daniels said to me that he said is extremely important to him. How does a quarterback react when things are going poorly around him? And getting pressure is one of those big ones. And he loved the fact that he never panicked. And I never got the sense he panicked either. And again, I like the fact that when he did run, he tended to step up in the pocket and through it, rather than spinning out, back, and around. That's something that we talked about that Shedeur Sanders did a lot of this year for Colorado, which I don't think is something good for a quarterback to do in terms of having sustained success. So I like that part of his game. I did not see panic. I do agree he tended to scramble to run more than he did scramble to throw, but I did like the fact, Lance, that he stepped up and through the pocket rather than out and around.
Well, on a related note, I think it's going to be interesting. Appreciate the phone call with respect to, the quarterback that one of the two that's ahead of him on the depth chart right now, Russell Wilson. He has a knack for extending plays.
But he scrambles back and out and around.
And that's what I'm saying. No. So to the caller's point, because I think what he was getting at was, how do you maybe tweak that or change that? Can you alter that?
That's a good question.
It is a great question. And what I was going to bring up first was Brian Dable was with a quarterback that had not a very good completion percentage in college in Josh Allen, and that improved. And not many people thought that was going to happen coming out of Wyoming.
The question, though, is that an instinctual thing? Or can you coach them to keep their eyes up longer?
And that's why I'm bringing that up, because completion percentage is different.
They're correct.
The pocket presence.
Because that can almost be a mechanical thing, right? You clean up somebody's mechanics, they can become more accurate.
Yep.
So, Anthony, I think that's a great question. Guys, really good calls today. That's tough to teach. It's an instinctual thing. But I do like the fact, and I think, Lance, when you watched him, I never got the sense that Jaxson Dart was freaking out when he got pressure. And, he's all over the place. He seemed very controlled all the time. So the fact that that's not a, fight or flee reaction, right, as the old expression goes, that I think maybe you can coach him a little bit more. That when the pressure comes, keep your eyes up a little bit more, maybe make some more throws down the field rather than running. Though I will say this, maybe the most efficient play in the National Football League right now is a quarterback scramble.
Correct, but you got to walk the fine line, because that was the other thing that even Brian Dable, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, please.
When you're going to run to scramble, and that was what I picked up, but sometimes, even when he was at the Senior Bowl.
Oh, my God.
You got to learn, hey, this is an all-star game.
Yep.
Okay? If you can't learn to slide during an all-star game, what does that mean during a game that actually counts? So that's the one thing.
I agree with that.
And that, to me, is teachable. You could teach a guy to slide.
And he was a baseball player. So he was a baseball player in high school. He's going to know how to slide.
Well, and Russell Wilson was a baseball player, too.
And he
slides,
it's funny.
Too. Yeah, but what I was getting to circle back to was, I guess it's just going to be interesting. He's playing, and he's going to watch a quarterback that does the opposite of what we're talking about, because Russ goes backwards and twirls and extends plays. And, like any rookie quarterback, and he even talked about wearing Russell Wilson's Seahawks jersey growing up. You're enamored by these guys. It's understandable.
Oh, it's fun.
But you're going to have to also process, okay, the things that Russ does, and what do I want to adopt and add to my arsenal, or what do I maybe want to shy away from, because he can get away with that because of how much more experience he has at this point in his career.
And you brought up some of those quarterbacks and coaches and what happened after the year. So Fran Duffy put this list up much earlier in the draft process, and I have a bookmarked on Twitter because I just think it's right on the button. And he went through teams since 2014.
Okay, so he went further back.
Yep, but just pick the quarterback in the top 3. Not even the first round, just in the top 3, all right? And now there were more quarterbacks than this just group, but I'm going to give you a list here.
But he focused on the top guys, as opposed to meeting somebody that was picked 15th overall, per se.
So Caleb Williams, first overall pick, head coach and offensive coordinator, fired after 1 year.
Yep.
Drake May, third overall pick, head coach and offensive coordinator, fired after 1 year. Bryce Young, first overall pick, head coach, OC, and GM, fired after 1 year. Trevor Lawrence, OC, head coach, fired after 1 year. 2018, Baker Mayfield, head coach, offensive coordinator, fired after 1 year. 2018, Sam Darnold, third overall, head coach, offensive coordinator, and GM, fired after 1 year. 2017, Mitch Trubisky, second overall, head coach, offensive coordinator, fired after 1 year. Jared Goff, 2016, head coach, offensive coordinator, fired after 1 year. 2015, Jameis Winston, head coach, fired after 1 year. 2015, Marcus Mariota, GM and head coach, fired after 1 year. 2014, Blake Bortles, OC, fired after 1 year. And again, there's more quarterbacks that
because
didn't
Daniel
happen
Jones should have been on that list with Pat Shermer, but
top
he was
three.
later. No, and that's what
Correct.
I'm saying. That's the example of what you're talking about.
But my point is that there are other quarterbacks picked in the
yeah.
top three where the people were retained.
Sure,
But
that's
the
a
fact
big
that-
list. That's a big list.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not rare, is my point.
No.
It happens pretty frequently where if you pick in a quarterback in the top three, it does not guarantee anybody's coming back, is my point.
Well, and I'll add to
Which
that.
is why that was always, I don't think, a point that made a lot of sense for people that called up with that.
No, and that's why every time it comes back, I continue to throw that out, and I'll now throw that list out as well because it just, there's no proof in terms of what we've seen in recent NFL history. Forget past, but what I was just going to add more context to that list. You threw out two quarterbacks who actually didn't even make it through an entire season without change. Baker Mayfield, okay, that
point.
change occurred during his rookie campaign after he took over for the injured Tyrod Taylor, and you're talking about Carolina. Frank Reich didn't even make it through the entire year with the Panthers. So, I mean, we've seen where the itchiness happens before we even get to Week 18.
I'm trying to remember in 2017, did the Bears head coach make it through the whole year with Trubisky?
Yeah, Matt Nagy was not removed.
No,
it wasn't. That was Nagy took over in 18. That was John Fox.
Yeah, did he
Fox,
make it
I
through?
believe, made it through the whole
Did he?
season.
Okay.
I don't remember John Fox.
That was the other
being
one
replaced.
I couldn't quite remember.
Yeah,
whether
I'm
or
going to
not he
look
did
it
or
up
not.
to confirm here real quickly. I'm pretty sure John Fox did not lose his job during the course of the season, and there was an interim. I'm just going to look at the timing.
Well, while you look it up, let me read
which he
our,
was removed.
our
Sure.
ticket read here. Folks, the draft is in the books. It's another impactful draft and free agency class for the Giants. That means it's full steam ahead for the 2025 season. Take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership and catch all the action at MetLife Stadium with the Giants and an exciting home schedule on the horizon. With a membership, you will also stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. With exclusive member access and benefits, to learn more about a Giants season ticket membership, visit giants.com/tickets.
So Fox was fired at season's end on January 1st, 2018.
Got it.
He lasted the whole year.
Fox, guys, go check out Giants TV, our streaming app. All of our content's on that. Giants YouTube channel as well. Thanks for joining us on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. From the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio, keep getting better. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time.